Hello, welcome back. Last time we talked about the beginning parts of linkage institutions, and we also talked about political socialization, where you get your views. Again, these are all views that can range from everything from sports teams to food preferences, but what we're talking about for the purposes of our course is obviously public opinion in regards to public policies and government. Where political socialization, a wrap up of last time that I don't feel like I covered that well, is that where do you get your beliefs more often than not? And we talked a little bit about it, but more often than not, it comes from your family. They are without a doubt the number one influencer on every person's, viewpoints in public affairs and public opinion. Through age, 14, you're with them all the time. You're with your particular parents all the time. They drive you to practice, to events, to clubs, everything that you're involved in, they're involved in. So you spend most of your time. Some of you still probably have family dinner and you actually see them. Others of you might go from school to band practice to a job and then home and eat a quick dinner and do some homework and go to bed, and not see your parents as often. So by the time you hit 16, 17, 18, your time with your parents is starting to go down a little bit. That's why they don't influence it quite as much as you get older, but they are still, the parents, again, the family is the number one influencer on public opinion. And I want to clear that up in the first minute here. So on to public opinion and polling. A significant number of people hold about a particular issue. And every time this comes up, it's like, well, what's a significant number? That's really undefined, to be honest. For a long time, they thought, well, it had to be 50%. Not true. If it can register on a poll, even the smallest percentage, it counts. So it can be the attitude that a certain number of people have about a particular issue. So again, it doesn't have to be 50% by any means. It just has to register on one of the possible answer choices of a poll. So what's the public? A public is a group of all the individuals that hold the same particular view on the same particular issue. You can be a member of a number of different publics. That can range from maybe you are a pro-choice person on one public, but on another public you might be favoring Second Amendment rights. So you could be a member of two different publics. Not always going to be the same people in each of those publics, but it's a group of individuals that hold the same particular view on this same particular issue. So this public opinion, the attitude or feelings held by a significant number of people, you can have it and you can be in a couple different publics. So I know that's confusing, but hopefully this will make a little bit more sense. What qualifies? Again, we're only concerned about public affairs for this course, but what qualifies as that? Politics, public issues, things that are on the either on the ballot or up for discussion. Public policies that can include anything from defense to education to welfare reform. That really everything that we're talking about, though, has to deal with government and politics. One other thing that's important is public opinions must be expressed, or else it can't be identified with a certain public. You might believe something, but if you don't mention it to anyone, you don't post it on social media, you don't write it down, you don't express it at all, it doesn't count as public opinion. Public opinion must be expressed in some form or fashion somehow. So how do we express it? A number of different ways. One, through elections. This is very general. It's not always specific to issues. Sometimes we will vote for a particular candidate based on, oh, I like that person, or, oh, that person's better looking and more attractive and I can look at them more. And it might not have anything to do with the issues. Sometimes you're so focused or a single issue voter on that one issue that person supports, and you might vote for them. And that's fine, but that's, again, very general, and it doesn't mean that you like everything about that candidate or really that you even like them as a person. But again, it is general, and it does generally show your preferences on public policy. Elections are also good because they're private. You're behind a ballot. You're behind in a ballot box. No one can see what you voted for. It's not public knowledge who you voted for. So people tend to be very honest. It is considered to be a useful indicator of public opinion. Elections are. Interest groups. These can be good too because it can show who believes what and how you're a part of. Groups who share the same opinion on a topic. And we will get into this in a lot more detail in the coming weeks. But the NRA is an interest group. Sierra Club, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, all interest groups. People belong to these because they have a shared interest in what that group does. They might be interested in getting their newsletter, their email. They might give donations to this interest group if they'd like. Or maybe it's just getting together in grassroots, getting together and writing your representatives and saying, this is how our group feels about something. The problem is we're not sure how many people that represents. Interest groups will often tell you, well, we have a listserv of 2 million people that we're in contact with quite regularly. Well, you might have gotten a bunch of email addresses from the county fair when you went to hand out, free beach balls or something, and people wrote down their email address. So we don't know how much or how accurate that is. We don't know how many people are affiliated with them, and that's tough to kind of gauge. Media, again, topics are discussed, and we talked about this last time, are discussed towards the interest of the public. It's not very accurate. Someone that is not a Democrat may watch MSNBC. Someone that is not a Republican may, in fact, watch Fox News. So measuring public opinion based on the media is tough to do because we're not sure who consumes what and what their purpose is for consuming that particular media. You can generally see what people like or what people believe with social media. You can see through Facebook and Twitter like who they follow. So you can get a gauge on it, but again, it's still not very accurate when it comes to public opinion or who feels a certain way about certain things. And then personal contacts. This is a great way to hear what someone has to say, but it's hard to say that this represents a significant number of people. You might sit in the lunchroom and there's 5 of you, and you could be talking about something, and it's really interesting. This is really interesting, and you've expressed your public opinion, therefore it is public opinion, and maybe 3 of the 5 others agree with you. So you can express that. It's personal context. It is a great way to hear what someone has to say, and you can, again, gauge where people stand on particular issues by talking to them and discussing with them. So how do we measure it? Well, one simple way is election results. That's easy. Often candidates will say this is a mandate with an election win. It's a mandate on everything that has happened in the 4 years prior, whether you are the incumbent, the person that's winning re-election, or you were the challenger, and say this is a mandate on those 4 years. But they will call it mandates because they want you to think it's a broad sweeping change. Sometimes elections are anything but that, but they do want you to believe that. Interest groups, membership, what polling says about particular issues can be useful. Media, again, we just mentioned, government media, then the people. Media, again, is involved in agenda shaping. They don't tell you what to think, but they often tell you what to think about. And the fact that if it's something they want you to know about or want you to discuss, all the media outlets will be talking about it, and they will bring it up because it sells, and that's what people want to hear and want to talk about. Social media is also part of this. Contacts, again, phones, emails, faxes, those sorts of things. You've probably never even seen a fax machine, although it's still in your textbook, so I still refer to it. And then polls is what we're going to get into. This is a very measurable way of doing public opinion. Oops, sorry. So polls. It is the most commonly relied on way to measure public opinion. And people say, well, is it the most accurate? Sometimes, I mean, usually it is. Usually people tell the truth on the phone or when asked, but sometimes people don't. Sometimes people get to the bandwagon effect, and we'll talk about a few of the problems with it. But generally speaking, polling is pretty accurate. Elections are really accurate because no one can see what your answer is. But these are accurate too. And why do we do them? They're really important because they're used to determine people's attitudes and viewpoints. Who? Well, politicians certainly use them. They do, and we'll get into through trial balloons. They'll float things. They'll get people's ideas or viewpoints on certain topics, and if people like it, they'll go after it and they'll endorse it and try to get it passed. So they're used to determine people's attitudes and viewpoints. And there's a few key phases that you have to have in polling. And if you're in statistics, you're well aware of these and can probably recite these to me better than I can to you. But one is the universe. This is the whole population that a poll seeks to measure. It's the very first thing you do. Do you want to poll all eligible voters in the United States for the 2020 election? Or do you want to measure the viewpoints of single mothers ages 25 to 35 who live in Ohio? And you want to get a subset of that. You want it to be random. Number of randomly selected people from a randomly selected places. This is not working for the highlight, going down there to the lunchroom and walking around and say, hey, I know this person, I'll ask them the poll question. That's not random. Every person has to have an equal chance to be chosen to do this as anyone else. So you have to have it random. Content and phrasing is very important because this is the way that there's leading questions, there's open-ended questions. We'll show a couple videos in class about this and how it can impact it, because these leading questions that you can do are, it's pretty incredible sometimes. And when you see it happen, you can see why someone answered yes or no to a question that maybe they didn't intend to do that. So content and phrasing is very, very important. And then quota sample, this is designed to reflect certain characteristics of a specific population. What types of polls are there? Well, there's straw polls. These are very unofficial. We could do one in class. Who's going to vote for, who amongst you and the voters out there is going to vote for Biden in the coming election? And this many hands go up. Or how many are going to vote for Trump and this many hands? And we can count, we can go through and say, okay, we know, 6 and 10 are voting for so-and-so. And that's a straw poll, not very scientific, and it's used very briefly, and they're used as exit polls too. Tracking polls are over a long period of time. You question the same group of people over a long period of time to see how their opinions change. Had a student a couple years ago that was involved in one of these. Got a call, asked about candidates, and then certain topics would come up, and that the phone would ring, and this person would take part in the survey in this poll about how they were feeling about certain issues and if their vote had changed. She said it was a fascinating experience and one that she would certainly do again, but she said she wasn't sure because she never answers the phone and just happened to answer it that time, and then got on a schedule and when they would call and got really interested in it. Exit polls used very, very frequently in the United States. We use them as people are leaving. They ask, who did you vote for? It's a person standing outside with a clipboard, just marking it down. You're under no obligation to tell them. You don't have to. You can say, I'm not comfortable saying. But they're trying to gauge who people voted for. And then deliberative polls are really good because they take on this small random group deliberating a particular topic, and you can go really do it. You can do a very good deep dive into certain issues. The problem is they're really expensive and they're very exhaustive, and you're only getting the opinion of the people that you've included in that room. You can often think of this as like focus groups. So problems with polls. Sampling errors certainly happens, and I'll show you a couple clips to go along with this. But sampling errors happen. Reader's Digest poll, they did it, sent it out to voters who had registered motor vehicles. Well, the problem with that during that election, I think it was the Truman-Dewey election, was people that had motor vehicles were only the wealthy people. So they sent it to only wealthy people, and they determined that Dewey would win, when in fact, when it comes election time, Truman won. Not enough answer choices. Yes or no is not good enough. You usually have to have about 5 answer choices for it to work. Strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, or strongly disagree. So you have usually 5 is a good one. Lack of knowledge. Some people just don't know. They don't know what you're talking about, particularly when it comes to talking about specific issues. They might not know about it. Relevance. How relevant is it to this person? Do they know about it? Is this something that they're concerned about? If it's a 60-year-old person, do they care about student loan debt forgiveness? Maybe not. Intensity of opinion. We can ask a question about alcohol and alcohol abuse amongst teens or something like that. How intense is their opinion? Did they lose a child in an accident? Are they a member of the Mothers Against Drunk Driving? So you can't measure that through a poll. And then question phrasing, simple things. They did this, and we'll talk about this, but essentially what they did is that after communism, the communist government was falling, they were moving to democracy. They ran a poll. They handed everyone a red pen to fill out the poll. Well, ultimately that messed up things because people associated red with communism. And then bandwagon underdog. When you ask people questions in big groups, people tend to go with the bandwagon question, and that's very common. You probably do it at the lunch table. It's not uncommon. And then America loves an underdog. If we know somebody's behind, we instantly tend to start rooting for them. So that can mess up polling and mess up some of the problems and create some issues for polls. So again, intensity, stability, and relevance. All 3 we just talked about. How intense do they feel about it? How stable? Is that opinion likely to change at all? If so, it can mess with the results. And relevant. How relevant is this issue to you and what you believe? And then the impact. So why do they do these? Politicians might do them. They might ask for them to be done because they want to know how they can influence public opinion or how they might use that for government purposes. What's important to know is polls can change, opinions can change, and bandwagon is a real issue and can certainly impact the polling and the accuracy of polls.